Good morning, dear friends. My name is Igor Yakovenko. It is now 7:45 a.m. in Kyiv. Today, March 6th, we continue our morning reflection on what is happening in Russia, in the world, in Ukraine, and in our souls. I would like to apologize for the 5-minute delay in our conversation. There are several specific reasons for that, which I will elaborate on in detail at the very end of the first part of our joint reflection. Well, I'll start with some good news. Russia and Ukraine have successfully exchanged 200 prisoners of war for another 200. And the fact that these 200 Ukrainians have finally returned home to their waiting families is truly wonderful. Additionally, the fact that 200 Russians who were Russian occupiers are also now returning home to their own country. Let's hope they have enough sense to avoid being sent back to the front a second time. Well, after all, people have probably learned some lessons from this. Also, another exchange of 300 for 300 is expected, which is also very encouraging. The really bad news, and there are actually several pieces of it, but the very first bit of bad news is that Donald Trump remains the President of the United States of America as of today. And here he is. There are several things. Next, let's examine some classic Trumpisms. In particular, Donald Trump recently expressed his deep dissatisfaction with Volodymyr Zelensky and openly accused him of being the one blocking a potential peace deal. He explicitly stated that the current president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, is the one hindering a peace agreement with Russia. Specifically, the quote is that Zelensky should get down to business and make a deal. Donald Trump made these remarks during a recent interview with Politico. Simultaneously, he expressed a strong sense of confidence that Putin, unlike Zelensky, is ready to reach a deal. And this has become a constant, steady trend in his rhetoric. It remains a trend, though exactly where he got the idea that Putin is ready for such a deal remains entirely unclear. But that is a significant question of personal conviction. Donald Trump places his trust in Putin and expresses a clear lack of confidence in Zelensky. When he was asked what exactly is preventing Zelensky from making a deal, Trump did not provide a specific answer, but he did say that Zelensky is simply not ready for negotiations, even though, in general, some negotiations are ongoing. And then, in a truly remarkable turn of events, he said it's unthinkable that he himself is the obstacle. You have absolutely no cards left in your hand, and now you have even fewer. Well, that is essentially Trump's position. Now let's go even further through Trump's statements because it is important for us to understand. After all, we are talking about the most influential person on planet Earth. And here is one of the most striking and truly remarkable statements he made during his interview with Axios. He explicitly stated that he personally, and he was referring to himself, Donald Trump, believes he should take a very direct and active part in the process of choosing the next leader of Iran. So, when he was informed of the reports that the individual widely considered to be the most probable candidate to succeed, the recently eliminated Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, is actually his influential son, Mojtaba Khamenei, who has long been a key figure within the Iranian leadership. Regarding Khamenei, he stated that this situation categorically does not suit him at all, because he is far too lightweight, at least that is the specific way he chose to put it. That is to say, apparently Trump somehow managed to carefully assess the complex anthropological data regarding the son of the eliminated leader, and so he thoroughly examined him, weighed his potential influence, and ultimately found him to be entirely lightweight in stature. And most importantly of all, he believes this individual will certainly not be the one to bring lasting harmony and true peace to the nation of Iran. And most importantly, he explicitly stated during the conversation that he does not want the appointment of a new leader who will simply continue the existing political frameworks and policies established by Ali Khamenei. Furthermore, he emphasized that he himself should be directly and actively involved in the entire selection and appointment process. So, in other words, he explained his position clearly. This is already a different interview. This is an interview with NBC News, where he went even further and said that he wants everyone currently in power to be removed of the leadership structures in Iran and that he has several candidates in mind. In other words, Trump has several potential candidates for the role of a strong leader. And then he stated that we want to come in and thoroughly clean everything up. Again, in the recent NBC News interview, he explicitly stated that we do not want someone to take 10 years to rebuild the country. We want them to have a truly good leader, and we have several people. In other words, the United States has several highly qualified individuals who would do exceptionally well in this role. Specifically, as for who these people are, Donald Trump deliberately chose not to disclose their identities, well, because it is quite clear what would happen to them if he named those names publicly. So that is the current state of the situation as it stands today. Now, regarding an invasion, he said that there's no need to do that because it's a waste of time, because they've lost everything. They've lost their fleet. They've lost everything they could possibly lose. So, in short, that is the essence of the entire story. His ultimate goal is to personally choose the Rahbar, the supreme leader of Iran. Do those who are currently choosing the Rahbar know about this? Trump did not specify. Well, apparently he plans to get rid of all of them too. At the exact same time, and this is very telling indeed, the US Secretary of Defense, along with Pict, Hexet, and practically all of the other prominent leaders except for Trump himself, explicitly state that a total regime change is not the primary goal of this current operation. Consequently, the fundamental objective is to significantly weaken Iran's long-range missile capabilities and their overall nuclear potential for the future. Regarding the program and the naval forces, after comparing these two specific statements, namely Donald Trump's statement and the official statements from Hexet and Senator Marco Rubio, there are actually many other people who can be listed here, who have gone on the record to say that they are not planning to change the regime at this time. I would like to pose a serious question. If there is direct personal involvement, if the President of the United States personally takes it upon himself to appoint the head of another state, and this supposedly does not mean a fundamental change of the regime. Moreover, he deliberately appoints them specifically with the intention that there will be no continuation of the policies of the one who was eliminated. Are you talking about Ali Khamenei? If that's not regime change, then what exactly is regime change? Well, anyway, why am I asking myself these silly and repetitive questions? Obviously, if you try to find consistent logic in Donald Trump's actions and words, then you simply don't understand what Trump is really about. But we have, after all, finally started to understand something, both about this man and about his specific style of politics. The most fundamental question that we must consider, in fact, is the following one. What does victory mean? That is, I have not the slightest doubt that this war will conclude with Donald Trump officially proclaiming a crushing victory. I have absolutely no doubt whatsoever that, well, this is exactly how it will unfold. Here is exactly how the situation will unfold. Trump will declare himself the winner, let's say, place a laurel wreath on his head, maybe do a little dance, and so to speak, applaud his own victory. There is no doubt about that. The question arises, how exactly, in what specific way will this happen? Well, first of all, regarding the matter of the change of ruler. Usually, after all, this decision is made by the Council of Experts. So, what is Trump planning to come to this council and say, guys, you're out? Or is he planning to kill them all? And then what? How exactly will he appoint them? So, to put it another way, from that specific point of view, yes, it's a complete analogy with Venezuela. To put it more clearly, it is just as if he effectively handpicked and designated Maduro's successor, who is namely Rodriguez. Well, in other words, the person simply doesn't understand the difference between Venezuela and Iran. So this raises a question. What does it really mean? It's clear that after some time Trump will stop this war. By the way, I think that after this program ends today, I will put it up for a vote. The question is, How would you go about assessing the overall duration of this war? For example, do you think, considering that today is the 6th of February, do you think the war will end before the current month of February comes to a close? Yes or no? I think it makes sense to put such a question to a vote. We'll sum up the results tomorrow. But here's the question. Once again, it's clear that after leaving Iran, Donald Trump will surely proclaim himself the undisputed victor of the entire ordeal, construct a massive and ornate triumphal arch of his own design, ride triumphantly through it on the back of a majestic white horse or perhaps even a regal white camel, and celebrate his perceived victory with great fanfare. That much is now abundantly clear to everyone. As for what he'll do next, I have no idea. Maybe he'll start a war with Cuba, maybe Greenland, maybe Canada. It's hard to say, but in any case, it's clear that he'll end this war with a triumphant victory. But the main question lies elsewhere. How can we truly be certain there are the officially declared primary objectives of this war? The missile program, the nuclear program, and most importantly of all, the question arises, how can we really truly be sure that at least these goals have been achieved? I'm not even talking about regime change, but at least that these goals have been met. And here, this is quite a significant question, which of course needs to be discussed with military experts. But right now, from various open sources, it is quite clear that there is a lack of any precise or verifiable data regarding missile production in Iran or on the exact number of missiles and launchers. There is intelligence data that is well known, and in particular that when looking at the various experts available today, and this is certainly my own personal choice, I place my full trust in the thoroughly verified information that is regularly shared by the well-known Israeli military expert David Gendelman. He usually has fairly accurate data, specifically in the military sphere. I'm not talking about social issues and so on right now. For those, I have other sources, including independent ones. But when it comes to military data, specifically military technical parameters, here David Gendelman, as a rule, provides fairly accurate information. He explains that he specifically refers to detailed data from Israeli intelligence and says that during the intense 12-day war, which took place in the summer of 2025, Iran possessed approximately 3,000 separate ballistic missiles. These were medium-range missiles, which are capable of reaching targets up to about 3,000 kilometers away. Then, he mentions the intermediate-range missiles, and it turns out there are even more of those in their arsenal. In addition to that, there are cruise missiles and drones, meaning those very Shaheds, and there are just an enormous number of them. So, as of today, I have to ask how many of these units still remain, given the fact that the strategic missile program was a primary target from the very beginning during this 12-day war. But once again, according to Hendelman's official data, which is derived from Israeli intelligence, that is, the missile program was, as they believed at the time, destroyed, the Iranian one, but by the beginning of 2026, Iran managed to restore it. So in fact, according to Hendelman's and the strategic assessments from Israeli intelligence, once again, the estimates are exactly the same as they were after everything was destroyed. That is, we are talking about approximately 2,500 to 3,000 missiles that existed in their arsenal. So at the same time, if, again, this is Israeli intelligence data, that if things continue at approximately this current pace, it will be totaling about 8,000 missiles. So what exactly is my conclusion? The conclusion is that Iran is like a hydra. You cut off one head and 10 more grow in its place. And I am more and more convinced that the method of research, comparative study of the adaptability of regimes and in general the political systems of countries, to external influences which I have called viscosity, cohesion, plasticity, all of these together. Of course, it requires a comprehensive and detailed description, along with the identification of distinct and well-defined variables that characterize one value or another. Regarding these regimes, it is quite real. This is a real manifestation of exceptionally remarkable viscosity, cohesion, and plasticity. In terms of the Iranian regime, that is, they actually possess the specific knowledge of how to effectively establish themselves hydrodynamically. Here, the American, or rather Israeli intelligence writes about what the specific material reason is. If we don't talk about certain characteristics of the regime, then the material reason for such rapid establishment is as follows. It lies in the fact that Iranian missiles are currently being kept and stored at. There are a wide variety of many different types of facilities, which specifically include massive underground missile cities. Based on reports provided by Iranian intelligence agencies, there are at least 24 of these specialized underground cities. These locations were targeted and hit in the summer during the 12-day war. But it was practically pointless in the end because they ended up being completely restored to their original state shortly after. Another distinct issue is, of course, the nuclear program. Here, again, according to Israeli intelligence reports, the situation is somewhat better because the nuclear program cannot be so easily or widely dispersed everywhere. But in general, scientific potential is a separate matter. I think I might be getting a little bit ahead of myself here. I'm getting ahead to one of the specific questions, which is the second part of our conversation, the question and answer session. And I remember that one of the questions had a rather dismissive attitude toward Iran, like, what are you talking about? That it's an incredibly ancient and profound civilization. It reminded me a bit, though I don't want to compare the situation of Russia attacking Ukraine with this attack by the US and Israel on Iran, because these are fundamentally and structurally different things altogether. If the first is a pure act, nothing more than a blatant crime, an act of aggression, then in this case, the military offensive by the United States and Israel on Iran has a basis because Ukraine did not threaten anyone while Iran did make threats. Therefore, here, so to speak, the moral and political aspects are different. But the subsequent reaction to this attack is equally astonishing and completely senseless. That is, we must remember that truly remarkable speech by Margarita Simonian when she said, Ukraine, well, what exactly is Ukraine anyway? To defeat Ukraine, how do you defeat it? Oh, come on, we could do it right now. Just now, during the commercial break, we were saying suppress all the firing points and that's it. It's an easy task. And they react to Iran in much the same way, not understanding what Iran really is, that it's not just a 5,000-year-old civilization, but a sophisticated and highly educated society with truly significant scientific and technological achievements. They have their own advanced space program, and they regularly fly into outer space, dear friends. They even sent a monkey into space. They have their own satellites. So, to go into more detail, there is a very specific question that has been raised, and I will try to answer it as part of the Q&A session. Therefore, it's difficult to say exactly what Iran's nuclear program is like right now and what condition it's in. In short, to put it simply, Trump got himself into trouble. Inspired by his brilliant operation to kidnap Maduro, he decided to act. Yet he simply doesn't know what Iran is or where it is located. He fails to realize that it's the largest country in the region by both land area and population, significantly larger than any single European country. Moreover, a very significant part of the entire country is extremely mountainous, which makes any potential military or logistical operations even more complicated than he could ever imagine. The destruction of this country, wiping it off the face of the earth. To put it briefly and to put it simply, Trump has found himself in quite a bit of trouble. That is why the outcomes are becoming increasingly uncertain. Well, we'll keep watching, including today. I am going to put to a formal vote the question of the duration, your personal assessment of how long this war will last. And now, here is the reason why I was late today for our meeting with you by 5 minutes. The thing is, I was honestly just about to sit down and start the live broadcast for everyone, but then I suddenly received some very important news from my colleagues that I simply cannot afford to ignore at all today. So, this news is extremely concerning. In Hungary, employees have been kidnapped of Oshad Bank, which is a major Ukrainian state-owned bank, along with armored cash-in-transit vehicles and other high-value assets. They were transporting various foreign currencies and precious banking metals between Raiffeisen Bank and also the Ukrainian Oshad Bank. Right now, the vehicles are in the center of Budapest, right next to the local police station. The total value is 40 million US dollars, 35 million euros, and approximately 9 kilograms of gold. Hungary has taken 7 Oshad Bank employees hostage. There is currently no contact with them. This is information from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine. In other words, nothing is known. Neither the reason for their detention nor their health condition. This was a specialized trip using a pair of heavy armored cash-in-transit vehicles from the country of Austria to Ukraine. So essentially, we are talking about state terrorism or state banditry, whichever you prefer. That is, these are not bandits, judging by the fact that these vehicles are parked next to the police station. These are not bandits, this is the state, the sovereign state known as Hungary, which effectively means that we are talking about a serious case of hostage-taking, a violent bandit attack, and a calculated attempted robbery. Well, whether it's armed robbery or theft, that still needs to be clarified. The difference between these crimes is known, but nevertheless, it still needs to be clarified here. So, what exactly happened? There were hostile statements. In other words, before this, there were words, there were actions. Highly aggressive and hostile actions by the Hungarian leadership towards Ukraine. President Zelensky also made some pointed remarks, commenting on Viktor Orban's big belly, for example, and about the fact that, without naming Orban directly, Zelensky said he would provide the specific address of the person who is currently holding up the 90 billion euros owed to Ukraine by decisions of the European Union. That is exactly what he said he would do. So to speak, he would give the address to the Ukrainian armed forces so they could have a word with him. Well, it's provocative, but still, these are just words. So, on Hungary's side, there are actions being taken. The blocking of 90 billion euros, which in fact is the only money Ukraine has right now. There are no other funds available. And these are actions that could, in principle, completely bankrupt and financially ruin Ukraine. Essentially, this could lead to incredibly challenging and dire circumstances both in the economy and, yes, in the ongoing war as well. This is because Ukraine simply has no money left to buy the necessary weapons. And now, this particular course of action is a clear act of state banditry. Orban has become notorious for the fact that he created a mafia-like state. Furthermore, Orban is known for systematically and harshly suppressing any form of opposition. The political opposition within the country often points out that Orban is known for being, in fact, the direct heir to those dark fascist traditions in Hungary that once led the nation to ally itself with Hitler. Orban is known for the fact that when choosing between Europe and Russia, he unequivocally sides with Russia while still being a member of the European Union and NATO. So, I host a particular program called Hero of the Bottom, and usually I tend to make this specific choice in favor of Russians. It is mainly, so to speak, a detailed analysis of what they represent as a people. It is my own personal take, so to speak, and I use quotation marks here. It is my own perspective. But here, of course, this is a pure example of a hero of the bottom. That's exactly what it is. I would even say this is one of the most disgusting actions that have happened recently. I don't know what the consequences of this event will be. Perhaps by doing this, Orban is trying to put pressure on the Ukrainian leadership to get them to fix it faster. The Druzhba oil pipeline, which was damaged by a Russian strike. But as for the question of why a person has resorted to robbery and even to outright state-sponsored banditry, I believe that the voters of Hungary should be the final judges of that. He has elections coming up soon. And I think that after he finds himself, it's a complicated situation there. There are predictions of a Magyar victory. Well, I mean, the Magyar Party, the parliamentary elections. But I hope that after Orban eventually leaves his position of power, he will be held strictly accountable for his many serious crimes, including